Come on, Twitch, wake up. I changed exactly where the mic is, so I don't know. I might have to adjust it a couple more times. Let's go ahead and adjust it while Twitch thinks we're offline. Come on, Twitch, wake up. Alright, we're live. Hurrah, and all of that. I'm going to go ahead and tell various internet places that were operational. Streaming game dev, that's an at, not a pound, game dev. Going to work on crooked rooms. Paste. And we'll do the same thing over here. Paste. All right. So I've spent the past couple of days working a little bit on debris modeling, and I've found some fast ways to do it and some good ways to do it, and unfortunately I haven't found one that's both yet. Adjust my mic a little bit. But the basic idea is that today we're going to work on the interiors. We're going to work on rooms. We have a lot of huge spaceships that get ripped apart like this, and we need to build the interiors. Right now we've got these placeholders. They're not very good, so we're going to really focus on that. But the way we're going to focus on that is we're going to start a new Blender file up. Save this as it is, and then we'll create a new one. Actually, it might have been easier to... sorry. I'm trying to think about the fastest way to do that. We've already got a file for it, so I don't know what I was thinking of. This is a really obsolete file, so we'll just delete everything that's in it. Boom, it's all gone. Save it, and we'll start creating some rooms. Why isn't this zooming in? Apparently you have to have an object. It won't just zoom in on your... Oh, this is odd. There's something wrong with the mouse, too? Oh, I'm starting to feel a little bit dumb. Okay, it was just the camera was really wonky. Sorry, I'm keeping on adjusting this mic because I have to make it so that it's not actually blocking my view of the screen. Whenever you adjust your mic stand, suddenly your mic is in the wrong place, and you're like, I gotta adjust this and that, and it makes squeaking noises and doesn't work right. But I think everybody can hear me. Let me go ahead and see if I can track down the Twitch panel. I navigated away. I don't think I'm going to have any viewers today, and that's fine. So what we're going to do for our rooms is we're going to be representing all of the rooms inside the spaceship. And what we're going to need to do is have a room template that's the same size so that I can array any number of them in a row. And what we're going to need for that is something that is convincingly tilted, because we're going to be cutting through the ship in an arbitrary way. It's never going to be flat, never going to be straight on. So we'll just have a room set up where it's always going to be a little off kilter. That does mean that we're going to have to be careful about cross sections and stuff, but we'll work on that later. Anyhow, this is going to be our basic room block, and we're going to carve a room out of this block. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it up so that it is this big, and that's a pretty good size for just modeling rooms. There's no particular size aspect here. I'm not modeling that's like 1 unit to a meter or something like that. Although, you know, if I double it again, now I could do it 1 unit to a meter, so that's what I'll do. I'll go ahead and try and make it 1 unit to a meter. But what we're going to need to do is actually cut this in a manner which allows us to have an interior that's been sliced open on a catty corner sort of method. Medusha says, "Boy, you got a viewer." Hey, Medusha. Yeah, I've never seen you comment before, so welcome to what passes for a stream. So what we need to do is come up with a slant that makes sense for something that got, you know, sliced into pieces by laser fire, and that's probably a pretty good slant, right? So once we've got a slant, we can extrude it and shrink it. And what I've done here is I've specifically chosen a size for the slant that is still integer based. So I can, hook these up relatively easily. For example, if I were going to, I could just duplicate this and then move it, and then move it. And you can see how that also just lines up. The back elements aren't going to be there, so we're going to have an easy time. Medusha says he was subbed, but never actually got here for a stream. Well, welcome to the stream. It is not as exciting as it sounds. All I do is model stuff and do some coding. Today we're focusing mostly on the modeling stuff. So I've got this front panel, and what we're going to want to do is move it to a location that makes sense for our needs. Unfortunately, moving this is actually quite difficult because the loop slide technique just doesn't work. So we're going to need to undo that and figure out where we want the room and sort of create it ourselves. But the very first thing we're going to want to do is just create a duplicate of that and call it a template. Sliced room template. Because we're going to, that's not how you spell template, Craig. Because we're going to have to create a lot of these. And we're just going to go ahead and cut a room out just by using loop cuts. And that way we can use loop cut slides and stuff like that just by hitting G twice to get this to work without distorting the front of the panel. That will let us have a room that is square in the back and tilted in front, and we won't have to actually suffer any. How nice. Like that. So we're going to just grab this panel and extrude it back, and then we're going to scale it on the x-axis to 0. Unfortunately, we didn't extrude it back in the correct direction. So let's try that one more time on the x-axis rather than randomly tilted, you know? There we go. So this is going to be our first room. And you can see how that will look when it is all lined up with others, you know? But we'll have different sorts of rooms. We're also not going to have just rooms. We're also going to want to have various sorts of non-room things like pipes. So those will get put over here. And I'm going to create a loop cut and then move it here. And then we're going to bevel it like this. And we're going to make this into a hole for pipes. So to do that, we'll just extrude. And once again, we're going to want to extrude purely on the x-axis for this. But it's the same height as the room, which is probably not a great idea. So we're going to go ahead and grab this GG, and that will get us to loop slide. There we go. That's more like it. And then we'll extrude and then pull that back on the x-axis. And that's going to be our spot for pipes. And we'll put in some pipes there. We'll do that right now because it's very easy. Medusha says, what am I modeling? Well, when you have a huge spaceship and you carve it open, on the interior there are rooms. So, you know, if you got like a laser blast against the Enterprise's dish section, for example, you look at that damaged cross section and you're going to see rooms. So this is the rooms that you get to see when a big spaceship has been carved open. We're not going to be making it particularly amazing. We're just going to be doing it well enough for testing purposes. But basically, you go into this burned out cross section and you can salvage. You know, you go to the medical room. You know, it's been blasted open by laser fire, but you can still get medical supplies from it. Stuff like that. It should be pretty fun. So these are going to be our pipes, and this is obviously not the right size, but that's okay. We'll just bring it into the sort of scale we're looking to make, like that. Now these are fairly high poly, but that's fine because you won't see any of this stuff until you're fairly close. So I'm not too concerned about making it high poly. However, I am concerned about using materials that make sense. So we're going to add 3 materials to this. And rather than just using pure UV offsets, we're going to give them different materials. And the reason for that is because each material in the game is, we use a different mechanic for stapling UV onto it. That means I don't have to worry about the UV that's actually set up here in Blender. I'll just use a fake UV inside of the game world. And by doing that, we can have the same model look different depending on exactly what's going on. And that's a pretty useful feature, so you know, I don't want to name it interior. I guess we'll just create a new material here, which we will call this warning, and we'll make it orange. Obviously, this material won't have any of the automatic stuff that we're going to be doing in Unity because this isn't Unity. Neo Shaman Tamago says, hi. Hello, Neo Shaman Tomato, or what is it? I don't even know what Tamago is anymore. I am making cut-up rooms. You are welcome to watch and comment if you have good ideas as to what you think these rooms should be like. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a certain number of pipes here, but we're going to want to, there we are, we're going to want to have the pipes that come out actually be fun damaged elements. So this here, for example, you can see how it's wedged in on the bottom, but on the top it comes out. Well, that's great, because what we can do is grab this, drop it down like this, and then we can just start to have some fun with control clicking to extrude in an awkward sort of damaged manner. Boom. See? How much fun is that, right? And if any of these seem like they're a little too sharp, we can always go in and bevel, and that will soften them up a little bit. All of these currently are not smooth, so we'll just set them to smooth. Now, these pipes would theoretically have either wire or an interior, so we'll just cap it off with a little bit of, you know, something to make it feel like it'll look decent up close. There we are. Now, right now, we do not have it set up to auto smooth. We'll turn auto smooth on and set it to 45 is a good number if you plan to do damaged metal. So we'll get to the damaged metal later. There. Yeah, that's fine, except it doesn't have any sort of horizontal motion, does it? So we're going to go ahead and just move these so that they're not dead on. Yeah. That's a little better. So now we'll just continue to do that basic same thing over and over and over. These are a little bit low. I didn't realize how far down I had set them, so we'll just raise them up. There we are. It's not really very expensive to have them be larger than you need them to be, but there's no reason for it. It's just confusing. And we'll go ahead and extrude up. Flip the direction, and then we will once again extrude out with this set of pipes. We're going to want this to move through and around the other one we created, so that's easy enough. Just grab this element here, nope, and then move it over and rotate it on the z-axis like this. And that's not too bad. Extrude in, extrude back, and seal it off. And that has none of the facial smoothing, so we're going to have to add it. And you can see that that twist is really pretty bad. I can either untwist it, or I can do something where that twist becomes something neat. So that's what we'll do. What we're going to do is just cut across at this angle and show some interior. So by hitting K and then hitting Z, you can cut through the entire object. And that means that if we do this, boom, we end up with a front element that has been severed. And we can just delete these verts like so. And that gives us a sliced open set of elements. If we extrude here, we can pull this in, and then we can extrude again and pull it back. There we go. And we're going to want to fill that in with another circle. It doesn't really matter what it looks like. It just has to have another layer, something that's not quite the same, you know? So to do that, we're going to want to put it inside of this circle, and it is dumb to try and eyeball it because it obviously isn't in the right spot. So I think there's probably an easier way to do this, but I can't think of it. So we're going to go ahead and leave it like this. And we're just going to try and slot it inside. We're not even going to need a lot of this, so let's go ahead and delete these far edges because we don't need them. And then we will just bring this edge down like this. And there we go. We've got our interior revealed pipe. See? Except for it, once again, needs to be smoothed. There we are. So that sort of setup looks kind of interesting and neat. It does cost a few faces, but that's okay. The point here is that we still need to adjust some of this. There we go. Here we've got some, we moved it, so we have to move this to keep it inside. There we are. And you can see that we've got this needing to be massaged a little bit, so we'll just massage it a little bit. Boom. To be honest, we can pull this in too. There we are. Well, there are lots of things we could do here to try and make this suck a little bit less. But to be honest, I'm happy with that. Now what we're going to need is some pipes coming out the opposite direction, which is why I've left that right edge empty. So we'll just grab one of these loops, duplicate it, rotate it on the x-axis or whichever axis makes it face the right direction. And then we will pull it down, pull it back, and make sure that it's the right size for slipping through that hole. There we go. How is it that I get this surface backwards literally every single time? You'd think that at some point I would accidentally extrude it the correct direction. There we are. So that's probably fine. We could do a little bit more by duplicating this and moving it up to the top like so. And we could change this end cap in any way we please by just deleting a bunch of stuff and then extruding again. Come on. That's obviously too far. There we are. Bunk. There we go. And we'll just give this a bevel. All right, so the last thing we want to do here is assign all of these some materials so they look reasonable. It looks like I have no light, so I guess I will add a light. Create a sun. And we're going to want to have enough light to see what we're doing, so we're going to create a second sun, point it the opposite direction, and change the color to a different color that is not as bright. There. Turn off the shadows on both just so that we can actually see what's going on. And now we'll go and assign some of these elements that we have spent so long putting together. So this will be a warning, and this will be highlighted, and this will be warning. And then this will be highlighted. Yeah, that's fine. And this will be warning. Perfect, right? Later on, we can add in some more high poly stuff there, but those are the pipes that give this room life. The only thing I want to do with the pipes that I didn't do is hook them up to the room. So we're going to duplicate this guy and then bring him back. And then we're going to extrude up on just the z-axis. And once again, we have to flip everything. That's how it works. And we are going to punch it into the wall. Doop, doop, doop. There we are. And that'll give us access to the room. Okay, so we're going to want to move it back just because it's not in a very good spot for it. There we are. Come on, scale Y0. My fingers aren't doing it quite right. So that's just going to be there to remind us where we have to put the vent and stuff. But we can put whatever we would like into this room. It is just temporary, just a placeholder. So it's not that big of a deal. But I wanted to make it so that it looks like a room. And that means that we have to decide what kind of room it is. And what I think I'm going to do is add in a little bit of interior topology just to make it a little bit more interesting. And the way to do that is probably to cut here and here. Now we're adding a lot of faces to the outside of this, but to tell the truth, this isn't going to be there. We're going to delete everything except for the front face. So it's not a big deal. But we are going to move this over here. And then we're going to go ahead and just delete these 2 points entirely and set this up as our rear element of the room, like so. And now the problem with this is that it is following the curve of the room rather than being straight vertical. So we need to select this entire loop that we've put in and scale it down to 0 on the x-axis. There we go, that's better. Now we have a lot of options as to what we want to do with this room and what we want it to be, but I think we're going to go ahead and put in a little bit of a door here to imply that it's, you know, an entrance or something. It's quite a tall room if this is the door though, so I think what we're going to need to do is actually pull this forward. And the reason for that is because otherwise our doors will be the wrong size. Because doors should be most of the height of the room. Not like, you know, 100% the height of the room, but most of the height. And I just screwed that up, didn't I? Go ahead and start that over without randomly moving it on the wrong axis. There we are. So the door should be more or less this size if I want it to be accurate, which is fine. We'll just go ahead and inset that a little bit to imply that it's a door. We're going to need to add in some materials here, so let's do that. Go hull and interior and highlight. That's fine. It's all good. And then here we're going to go ahead and highlight this door. Actually, we want most of this room to be interior, don't we? Boom. We didn't quite catch that wall. Boom. And that wall. Boom. Go ahead and set this door up as hull. And we could put in like a little teeny handle. Like this. We can make that highlighted. Boom. All right, so that doesn't quite look like a door, but it's closer than nothing, you know. And what else can we do? Well, if that is the entrance or the exit, we'd put like a little couch over here in this corner. So let's go ahead and quickly build ourselves a little couch. Generally speaking, if I have to build furniture, I build it as its own object and then slot it in. So that's what we're going to do. We'll just start with this block, turn on our x-axis mirroring, and then we will cut this in half and delete half. And then we'll turn this into a couch. Now, couches have a fairly basic setup, so it doesn't have to be anything particularly amazing. We'll just delete the pieces that don't make any sense, and then add in the pieces that we would like to have make sense. Merge all of those doubles, and then there we go. Obviously, we can make any kind of couch we'd like. I've made a very, very basic one. And that's fine. We could put in handles and stuff if we would like, but I don't like. I'm going to go ahead and just leave it like that. If I do want to put in a handle, I could always just duplicate this piece and then scale it appropriately. And then extrude out like this. And then if I grab this element, cut here, grab this element and pull it in, you have something vaguely resembling a couch. And that's vaguely resembling is really good enough for our purposes. We'll go ahead and just pull it a little bit in here so that it feels a little softer. And we'll raise up the bottom so that it feels a little bit higher. And then we'll bevel some stuff so that it feels like it is soft and not made out of blocks of wood. So there we go. And then here. a very, very basic couch, and that's fine. We could add a little bit to this couch by just having it have some legs on it. So we'll just turn off clipping for a second and create a couple of legs. There we go. So the couch needs to have a material, and it should be a material which feels like it's cloth. So we're going to go ahead and create a cloth material, make it just a kind of a gray off blue sort of thing. And inside of our game world, we'll automatically slap a texture on it that will allow it to look correct. I'm going to duplicate that couch and move it into the correct space, and just drop it down onto the floor until it looks right. You can see how it's quite large. So we're going to just shrink it down until it feels like it's the right size. Zoop. Now I have the couch centered in the middle of the couch, and I'm not a big fan of that. So just here for our main couch system, we're going to move it until the pivot, which is this little dot, that now it's right there. This pivot needs to be at the base of our object. And the reason that's good is because we can use that to drag it around. So if I delete this, you'll see what I mean. Go ahead and call this couch. Duplicate the couch. And then if I grab the object from here and try to drop it in, oh, I don't have this turned on. Oh, there we are. You can see how that just slides right in, and it is at the right height for the room. Go ahead and shrink this down, and then we can continue to drag it around until it feels like it's in the right spot. There we go. That feels more or less correct. Now, everything else we can do whatever we would like in terms of trying to make this room look good, but I don't need to try and make this room look good yet. What I would like to do is add in a vent. So we're going to duplicate this door because it happens to be roughly the right scale. It's not bent or screwed up. And then we're just going to move it until it is in roughly the right spot for a vent, because we know where the air is coming in. And while there's no absolute reason that we have to have this set up, having it have some sort of sense of reality is always going to be a benefit to us. So just create a vent and then color the back of the vent. And then what we're going to need to do, obviously, is damage the vent, because this plane here has been cleaved open. So to do that, we are just going to cut the vent. Oh, that didn't work. I should probably just punch it out into its own object so that I don't accidentally cut the wrong thing. Cut like that. And then cut across like this. And then just delete some key elements. You can see that it did not cut all the way through on this blue area, so we're going to have to do some more cutting. There we go. And we don't need the back face, so we're just going to get rid of it. And then we're going to close this off with just some basic face sealing. Come on, click on the right thing for once. Now, because of the way that this is going to work, there's not really a whole lot of worry about the player getting close enough to this vent to see any sort of errors we create. They would have to actually get inside the room, and this is far too small of a room for them to get inside of it, so it's okay. It doesn't have to be great. We will, however, want to create the feeling that this vent got sheared open. So we're going to go ahead and extrude off of that element and create ourselves a little bit of a clip that has been torn off from the object. There we go. Now this face is perfectly smooth, And obviously we're not going to want it to remain perfectly smooth, but the idea of adding in complexity on this face is actually a little bit tough. There are some things we can do to try and... Oh, Cody 1712 Re showed up and said hi. I have no idea how long ago that was. I wasn't paying enough attention. This face needs to be much more complex and dark because it has been burned away by a laser or whatever. But right here we don't have anything that can make it complex and dark. The closest we have is we can do a subdivide call like this and then put in some fractal on that subdivide, and you can see how that creates some real janky mess. The problem is that we actually can't afford to change where this surface lines up. The outer edge has to remain the same regardless of what else we do. So this here has to remain this crisp line. All we can do is change the rest of the face inside of that to try and be a little bit more ragged. So I guess the first thing we'll do is we'll delete this back end because we're not going to use it for anything. So we'll just grab all of these points and just delete them all. There we are. But yeah, there are a couple of things I want to do in terms of making this look good. Let's just go ahead and see whether or not I can do it by adding in some edge cuts and then not cutting the edges with our subdivides. So if we do this and then we pick everything that's not actually an edge, maybe that'll work. Let's find out. So we subdivide, we keep our fractal up pretty high, maybe even higher than that, and you can see that that creates a mess, but the edge remains crisp. So that should work. The only difficulty here is that we're going to need to adjust the exact edge so that it remains good in terms of how we want it to look. These here are a little bit too large, same with these and these. So we're going to subdivide them again. There we go. Obviously, all of that needs to be smoothed, but not too much. We'll go ahead and turn on the auto smooth at 45. And that should create some damaged, burned out elements. Obviously, some of these elements are in need of adjustment, so we'll just manually grab some of them here and there and pull them into something resembling a decent shape. Smooth. There we are. We got some nasty edges, especially here where our subdivide, I forgot to turn the triangle modifier on, and we ended up with an awkward face. Hopefully Unity will be able to interpret that correctly. Sometimes it does not, and it just screws up. We will see. So in the game environment, this set of surfaces will be adjusted a little bit by the renderer, by the shader, to have a nasty-ass texture on it, so it'll look burned out and damaged. But we need all of the actual material, all of the mesh elements to actually line up with our needs here. So we'll just go ahead and pull them until they make our setup look more correct. There, that's probably as good as we need it to be. Just pull out some of the last remaining obviously wrong elements, because the key here is you don't want the mesh to look like a mesh. You want the mesh to look like damaged metal. It's not going to matter so much once we put in the heavy texture, but that's, you know, for now we just want it to feel like it is a little bit interesting. Good enough. So if we wanted to, we could create an entire wall out of just this room by simply duplicating the room and moving it into the next position, like so. And if we wanted to do that, it would be quite easy to create as many elements as we needed to make this wall work out. We can also offset it because while it is integer based, it's not 1 based. So I could, I don't want to, there we are. I could bring it down half and then slot it in like that, and you can see that that also works. Although we don't have any sort of caps. So what we're going to need to do is develop a cap. My idea for this is that all of the rooms that are near the edge of the ship are going to be equipped with a foam that attempts to close holes, breaches. And because of that, what we can do is allow those upper rooms to just have a giant amount of blobby foam coming out, and that will nicely seal up any sort of nasty mesh edges that we might have. That said, I do want to test this in terms of rotation. That's not rotating on the y-axis like I said it was. There we are. Oh, I guess because it's tilted, this might end up being a little bit harder than I hoped. I could probably do it in Unity by using some vertex snapping. Just testing some geometric stuff out here. That's fine. So we're going to grab our prototype and bring it down. Oh, I didn't actually, hold on. I need to actually merge all this crap together. Oh, sorry. Apply this. Now merge it all together. And we'll call this room, I guess it's probably someone's apartment. Now grab this, bring it down, like so, and we're going to do the same thing, but this time what we're going to do is we're going to have the cap, and it's going to basically be a giant blobby mess, and we're going to use the cap above, below, to the right, and to the left of the stretch of rooms we're creating. So in order to create a good cap, we're going to follow mostly the same basic pattern. Maybe we'll move it over here like this, and then cut here, and then cut here, and bevel. And then maybe we'll just move this in and bevel. We can grab this and move it up, grab this and move it down. Oh, I need some water. And then we can create some kind of room sort of thing here. We don't need to have a very good room because it's going to just be full of slime. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do this and pull them back enough to suggest that there are rooms. We may as well scale that down so that in case we ever see it, we'll know that it's flat on that side. But how do you create foam? Well, here in Blender, there are a couple of techniques you can use to draw on the surface of a mesh. If I can remember how those work, then we can do it. We could also use a simpler method, which I guess is probably a better method. We'll go ahead and use a simple method. A simple method is to grab the elements that we're planning on filling with foam, punch them out, and then sculpt them. When we sculpt them, we can turn on dynamic topology with a fairly small pixel size. Now, the reason that this isn't quite as good is because it's going to give us a lot more stuff. We're going to have a lot more polys. But we can do some decimate on it, and it'll work out. Also, if you are ever trying to do this, you're probably going to end up with a situation where hold on, I screwed that up. A situation where your what am I trying to say here? Sorry, I suddenly got a kind of weird headache, and I'll just keep going and pretend that I finished whatever I was trying to say there. So we're just going to pull these out here. Now you can see that we've ended up pulling them down, so maybe that's not a great idea. We'll go ahead and undo everything we just did and manually just grab these and pull them forward. Because there's no reason for us to do something that doesn't make any sense just because we're too lazy to hit the edit button, right? Now we'll go back into sculpt mode, turn on dynamic topo again, and try one more time. So if we go ahead and shrink this radius just a touch, we should be able to draw, and that'll give us a blobby feeling. But the problem is, oh, I remember what I was going to say. These are not safe to model. They don't have a backside, so they are they're non-manifold. And that means that as we model them, we may end up accidentally creating large patches of nonsense. So when that happens, we may have to deal with that using some editing. And you can already see that happening here. We got some gaps. So what we can do is, just to make it so that that works okay, we can just manually put in some safety, and that's how we'll do that there. This is a little bit iffy on our end over here, so we'll just keep trying over here. We may have to do some snaking or something, but we'll figure it out. And these rooms all filled up with slime in order to close the new hole in the hull. Obviously, they're intended for micrometeorite hits and not for giant lasers cutting the ship in half, so they are of somewhat limited utility. But that didn't stop them from trying. We'll go ahead and use grab to try and just get this to not have giant gaps in it. I don't think that's going to work. Let's go ahead and delete this entire object and try one more time without the crap part. What do you think? Can we do that? Trying again without the crap part? It might be tough. So we'll just go ahead and duplicate this, punch it out, and now we have this, right? And we can pull that forward like that. And we can edit it and move it however we need to edit it and move it in order to make it viable for our purposes. We're going to grab the edges here and turn this into a manifold object just for the sake of modeling it correctly. There you go. Now this we should be able to model. So let's try it again. I guess inflate is probably worse than sculpt. We will see. Dynamic topo, please. What am I at? 12 again? No, 6. That's good. So just blob. Nobody stops the blob. By the way, if any of you have any suggestions on better ways to model large amounts of foam coming out of something, feel free to let me know. I am always happy to hear good ideas, or even mediocre ones. Now this foam is supposed to be really big, so that's what I'm going for here. We're building up a massive, like, safety foam thing, but obviously it is attempting to close off something which can no longer be closed off. There's no chance that it would ever be able to actually stop the massive leak that is getting cut in half. But it does give us an opportunity to have something that closes off the top and sides of any given strips of rooms in a relatively less than obvious manner, and that's nice. Blob, 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 blob. There might be a faster way to do this. I'm kind of not used to Blender's modeling at all. The sculpting in Blender is kind of weird to me for some reason. It really never clicks, and a big part of that is because the Blender sculpting is so awkward when it comes to specific sorts of situations. For example, it doesn't keep the normals intact when you're modeling, and so it's really hard to tell whether or not you're changing the normals into something viable. Another problem is that when you have two blobs like this, we ended up accidentally having a situation where they can't easily cross, as you can see. What did I just do? Did I just undo the whole thing because I'm an idiot? No, it just, for some reason in render mode, it's not showing it. That's creepy. So let's go, let's go. Blobs ahoy. Come on, blob it up. That's pretty decent, I suppose. We got some seams here that I want to get rid of, so we'll just go ahead and hit smooth, smooth them away. And we're going to use the inflate brush now to overlap them here at the edges, because they need to overlap here at the edges. There we go. And if we take a look, what we've got here is a wall of foam. I'm going to want to make it look like there was a room here, so I'm just going to deflate in a room-like shape here in the middle, just to give it a sense that at one point it was a room until it got full of foam. There we are. Now, the problem with this, of course, is that it is roughly a kabajillion verts. It's got 35,000 faces, which is obviously no good, so we're going to need to cut that down by an order of magnitude. We'll just go ahead and decimate. We have a couple of options, whether we prefer a collapse or a planar. If we use collapse, that's too few faces. If we use collapse, that's generally pretty good for this sort of system. If we switch over to planar, we can get a similar sort of result, but it's going to end up creating massively non-quad and non-tri faces. See this face here with its like 12 points? Unity will barf if you're not careful on that sort of thing. So collapsing is generally better. It still will create occasional faces that Unity won't like, but it's not going to create primarily faces that Unity won't like. There we are. That should be good. Hit some apply on that. Boom. And if we take a look, you can see that these are all tries and maybe a quad or two hidden away somewhere that I don't see. And that's fine. That's great. Unity will not ever make a mistake if we feed it tries. And we can just smooth the whole thing out, and we end up with a relatively nice blob. We don't have a blob material yet, so we'll go ahead and create one. We'll call it blob, and we'll just make it something that is very sort of neutral and bland like this. We'll change how it works in our in Unity when it comes to creating the actual object. This whole thing should be just one material, and that material should be, I think we're using machinery, yeah. There we are. So that's going to be what we put at the top and bottom of our various rooms. We can create multiple versions or do whatever we need to do, but the idea is that these will slot in rather nicely and keep it so that we don't have any sort of issues with our rooms. No, too much. So we don't have any sort of rooms with any sort of pop through or visible rear seams or anything like that. Just oh, that's just, I need to merge them. So we'll call this the, did I delete, god dang it, I deleted the default. That's fine. We'll have to recreate the default then. So this here, we'll duplicate this and drag it out. Deal with it in a minute. And then this will be our sliced room blob. Duplicate that, bring it out, move it into place. And then the downside of this being, of course, that we are going to want to do a lot of rooms to try and keep it from being like a giant ring of blobs. These blobs are really obvious and bad. Nope. For our current setup, but they work relatively well most of the time. And we can do things like invert them and stuff to create some unusual surfaces, and there are lots of things we can do with them. But as you can see, if we do it like this, there's a lot of blob and not a lot of room. So we're going to have to be careful to create mostly rooms. Now the advantage of this is that these blobby elements are going to be buried into the hull. So most of them are going to be chopped off by hull elements, and we're not going to have to worry too much about them. It'll work out fine. That said, we're going to want to actually go over into Unity and get this working in Unity. Why is everything... I'm not sure why. The camera is inverted. Am I upside down? That was weird. So here we have the rooms that we just built. They're facing the wrong direction for the sun to catch them, so we'll just reverse this whole thing, yoink, just so we can see what's going on. And here you can see the room that we have created with its charred black surface. And Unity has already barfed on at least one of these faces. That's to be expected. Unity is really bad at interpreting faces correctly. But here in Blender, it's actually still a pretty mediocre face. It's got a fairly nasty setup even here. So we'll just go ahead and smooth out this particular element. And if I'm not mistaken, that ought to fix it. Well, it's not best, but it's okay, I guess. So the idea here is that these will turn into a bank of rooms. So that's what we're going to do. Just going to quickly just duplicate some of these and try and create a nice bank of rooms. And just use a snap. And we'll just duplicate. Nope. Duplicate. Nope. Duplicate. And then once again, we'll snap. That's not going to snap very well because I didn't click on the right spot. And then what we can do is grab these rooms here and duplicate and move them down. Once again, we will just snap and then duplicate and move them down and snap. Having the same room over and over is obviously not ideal. They look kind of crap, but that's something we will fix later on when we got multiple rooms. I'm just trying to see whether or not this approach will work at all. I can't really use a snap very easily on these guys, so I'll just slot them in manually. And then we're going to want to have some that are off to the side. The blobby rooms can be placed pretty willy-nilly because the blob blurs any sense that they might have of exactly where they're supposed to be. The foam is just foam, so it's, you know, whatever, right? Good enough. We'll just grab all of these, duplicate them, and move them over to the far side. Boom. Perfect. All right, so with this admittedly rough setup, can we make the demo that we build look decent? We're going to want to delete some of these elements because they're in our way, and then we'll move this into the interior of our damaged ship, which is over here. Woo! Woo! Come on. So here we have the demo elements. We'll just delete them and put in our new elements instead. Oh, different keys than Blender. That's fine though. All right, so we either need to expand them even more or something. We'll just go ahead and expand them. These are now a little bit unrealistically big in terms of how big the spaceship is supposed to be, but that's fine. For testing purposes, it is great. Then we'll just duplicate this and move it down. Obviously, we are creating something that's terribly bloated in terms of how much Unity has to work to render this, because it's a lot of different objects. But in the final version, what we'll do is we'll just sinter these together into one mesh, and it should be fairly straightforward and, you know, no problems. So now we have created some rooms. Let's go and check and see how they look. Then we'll work on some visuals for the ship and some other details like that. Kind of spread ourselves out a little bit so that we don't work on one thing too much. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum. Dum, 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 dum. Yeah, that foam is a little bit repetitive. I guess the rooms are actually about the right size. They might be a little bit big. It's fine, though. So it looks like that foam isn't going to work as I have programmed it right now. Maybe I should change how it works, and instead of it being attached to a room-like entity, it's just a blob of foam. And then I can just streak blobs of foam wherever they're needed. That would probably be a little bit better. So that's easy enough. I can create arbitrary blobs of foam in Blender very, very easily. So that's fine. And obviously the materials are all wrong at this point. But that's something we can change. First off, let's go ahead and modify this blob material until it feels a little bit better. We're going to want to just make it completely flat. We could make it shiny instead, but that really highlights the fact that it's a repeating pattern. So if we make it very flat, it'll be a little bit less obvious, and that'll be nice. It'll help a little bit once we apply some texturing that's non-repeating. But this room is bad. It's not gonna do its job at all. So we'll just get rid of it and create a new blob object. We'll start with an icosphere and blob it up from there. So we'll go into materials, add in a blob, boom. And then we will change it over into our sculpt mode. And let's get some blobbing done. I think I can change the strength some. There we are. Dynamic topo, please. Thank you. Now, it doesn't really matter how big or shaped these blob elements are, but I think making them sort of long and thin is probably for the best, so that's what we'll focus on for now. And then we can just adjust them however we need to adjust them when we're building our entities. All right, so now we have just an arbitrary blob shape. I'm not a particular fan of it, though. It doesn't have any sort of distinguishing features. Let's go ahead and try and give it a little bit of something interesting about it. What do you think we should try and do? How about some pinching? I don't think that really helped much. Now it looks more like a turd than ever. Some spinning? Yeah, actually that might work, yeah. Creates just enough of a sense of it existing as a physical object, you know? Now it looks like a large intestine instead of a poo. That's a little bit too much spiral. There we are. There we are. So that's our foam. And we can just break it down a little bit so that it is not quite so heavy, because right now it is, how many faces? 10,000 edges, 8,000 faces. So that's too many. Let's go ahead and decimate it. As before, we should probably use collapse so that we can keep it intact. And you can see how well this shape kind of holds up as we decimate it. It looks like the right shape is going to be there. So that seems like a decent size. It's 1,700 faces, which is not too many. And we'll want to smooth everything out. Like so. And now we've got a blobby set of faces. If we really want to see what we can do, we can always turn on auto smooth and give ourselves some hard edges, but I think that's a mistake, so we won't do it. I'll call this blob. Go back over into Unity. We're going to lose a lot of our setup. That's fine. We actually should just start over, I think. My eye is twitching for some reason. Neo Shaman says, why not have a Perlin in code on a mesh? Vanilla Perlin is blobby even. That's not a bad idea. Building my own mesh in real time in the game is not something I had planned on doing because it extends the amount of work I've got to do. But it's not a bad idea since it's a fairly straightforward mesh to build. That said, let's see if we can get this to work. Oh, Neo Shaman says just use a displacement shader. That's not a bad idea at all. I actually didn't think of that. Because then you could just create like a cylinder or even just a sheet and make it render as a blob. You could even do something like a different amount of what do you want to call it? A different amount of tessellation based on how close the player was and stuff like that. That would actually be fairly easy. I've never done that particular shader on my own, but it doesn't seem like it would be very hard. I know that I could do it using the Shader Forge, except for then it wouldn't work because Shader Forge is malfunctioning on my machine for some reason. So, go ahead and set this up. If you happen to know how to create a tessellation offset shader, hit me up with that because I don't happen to have one. But, you know, I'm confident that I could create one if I gave myself an hour and studied it a little bit. Simpler is vertex offset. Well, I would need to do, I mean, I could do it without tessellation, but they're the same difficulty, I think, because tessellation is just a value you can tell the shader to use. You just say tessellate this, and it goes, okay. At least that's how I understand it. I think. Blob. Nobody stops the blob. 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 That might be too much blob. Yeah, I haven't done shaders in a couple of weeks now. I'm thinking about it. I know I can do vertex offset because I've done it before. But I can't remember. I think I need to do that as a vertex shader and not as a surface shader, which might be a little bit rough given the current setup I've got. So I'll have to think about how to do that. I think that you've got a good idea. I think a tessellation shader is the way that I'm going to do it in the long run. But in the short run, I'm going to go ahead and just keep it with blobs for testing purposes. Oh, that was the wrong spin. There we are. That's better. No, I think 5 is probably best. Excuse me. This exact setup that I've got for this particular damaged model is not very suitable for what I'm trying to do. It is just a test model, so I guess that's fine. But this doesn't slot in very well because it has some poke outs and stuff like that. They'll be a little bit more resolved when I actually do this properly. All right, go down here and zoom. Okay, so this look a little bit less obnoxiously repetitive. Obviously, I'm just using one room over and over and over, so there's limits to how non-repetitive it'll be. But, you know, I definitely think this is better than what it was even just a couple of minutes ago. If I even had just 3 or 4 rooms, I could probably get away with it. Now the other option is to use arbitrary shapes like this. So you can see that this is not really rooms, it's just kind of fake non-rooms. And that doesn't look bad. The question is whether or not that's worth doing, because it means that when you explore the interior of the ship, you're not going to find rooms, you're going to find just shapes. To be honest, I really like how that looks. I may decide that that is better than what I'm doing here. In fact, I think it is. Now that I'm looking at it, I think I just wasted everybody's time because my stand-in shapes feel so much better. But what I'll do is I will have it so that at certain points these stand-in shapes are replaced with debris that comes out and looks, you know, is useful debris. But these stand-in shapes actually feel really good, and I think they feel substantially better than the rooms I created, which is kind of a shame. Well, that's a wasted hour. Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and modify the ship, because it doesn't look quite right. It's got some stupid stuff going on. We're going to fix that up. So the problem is these maneuvering jets look kind of like crap. And what we're going to want to do is change the maneuvering jets so they look kind of less like crap. There are 2 things that are making them look like crap. One is that they suddenly just come on and then they stay on for a long time. What we're going to do is we're going to go into the thruster script and we're going to add in a slow startup visual mechanic. Now we have a couple of visuals already assigned. Heat rate, for example, which is great. That's the opposite. It's something that, you know, keeps on after you've turned it off. But we actually want the opposite. We want something where it throttles up at a slower rate, but only visually. So we're going to call this, here's the throttle reporting lerp. That might actually be all we want. The throttle reporting lerp might just be something like I should just change. So this is a throttle reporting lerp of 2. Well, if we reduce that down to 0.5, it should be a lot slower, right? Yeah, you can see how they slowly come on now. but they also fade away really slowly. I want that to be the opposite. I want them to come on slowly and then fade out quickly. So this throttle reporting lerp, we're going to replace it with two different lerps, the throttle increase lerp and the throttle decrease lerp. So throttle increase reporting lerp and throttle decrease reporting lerp. And then down here, where we get those throttle reporting lerps, there we are. So here we say, if throttle is less than throttle report or throttle reporting lerp equals 0, then the throttle report equals throttle. This is the code we need to replace. So if the throttle does not equal the throttle report, then we say if, well, we don't even have to do it like that. If throttle is less than throttle report, if throttle increase report equals 0, then throttle report equals throttle. Else, throttle report equals mathf.lerp, blah, 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 blah. Let's get rid of this highlighting. There we are. Mathf.lerp, throttle report, throttle. I can't spell throttle anymore, guys. I have forgotten how. Time.delta time times throttle increase reporting lerp. Perfect, right? And then we put in an on throttle changed. There we go. Now we do the same thing with an else. Else, if throttle is greater than throttle report, then we're going to want to, actually we did that wrong. This is the throttle decrease reporting lerp, and the other one's the throttle increase reporting lerp. It's fine, it's fine. There we go. And then down here, we just delete this shit, because nobody needs it. Boom. Throttle increase and throttle decrease reporting lerps now allow us to shape how the engine turns on and off in a visual sense. So we can make the throttle increase reporting lerp a 0.5 and then call that a day. Apply. But our main engines down here have the wrong throttle lerping because we've changed it. I think that's probably going to be fine though. Let's take a look. So if we try to turn, you can see how they turn on very slowly and then they fade away. That fade away needs to be snappier though, so we're going to go ahead and make it a lot snappier. Actually, that might be like a valid fading away. I think that is, yeah, that's actually pretty valid. But we'll go ahead and change the throttle decrease lerp to 0 so that it snaps off. The other thing we need to do is change all of these lights. These volumetric spotlights are much too bright. So we're going to take all of them and lower them down substantially. But the good thing about that is that we don't need to modify the lights. We just need to modify the light management script, which is here. I'll change the intensity multiple to a 3. And then apply. Boom. Still not perfect, but it's at least a lot less obnoxious than it was a couple seconds ago. Right? Right. That engine looks so good though, that main engine. I think that maybe I might have to change to using particle effects for the cold thrusters, because this isn't really great. Let's go ahead and see whether or not I can get this to feel right. Now, in order to make it feel right, what we're going to need to do is just take a look at it here in the game view and adjust it until it feels a little bit better. For starters, our intensity is going to be 3, because that's what it is in the game, right? But you can see that that doesn't really feel very good. Which one of these is the wide? Well, one of them has shadows turned on. That's wrong. This one has an angle of 16, and this one has an angle of 37. So this is the wide-angled one. And what we're going to want to do is have noise on this one. But I can't get the noise to actually trigger. And I'm not sure why that is. You can see how there doesn't appear to be any noise happening there. I've tried a couple of different things, and it doesn't seem to really care. I don't know what's up with that. But what we're going to try and do here is create some fall off for the light so that it doesn't go all the way to the end. Where is our extinction? There it is, extinction. So with an extinction of 0.2, you can see that it doesn't hit all the way to the end. Extinction of 1 gets nowhere. Extinction of 0.1, it still reaches the end. So the default of 0.2 might be perfect. Let's go ahead and set that up with everybody having a default of 0.2 here on extinction. And we'll turn on noise for all of them. And then down here, we're going to give an extinction to this other light as well. Excuse me. And once we're done with that, we should be able to apply to make it echo into all other lights. Now the problem is it didn't seem to be as good as I thought. That extinction might be bad. Let's try it with a little bit higher extinction, like 0.3. 0.4, 0.5, 0.5, okay. All right, so let's go ahead and try that on for size. That said, I may have to turn the, yeah, that's pretty hard to see. We may have to turn that back up to 8. Yeah, I think that's viable. I think I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bit better in terms of how fast it turns on. Right now it's got a throttle increase rate of 0.5. I'm going to make it 2, and that should give it just a little bit more pep when it turns on. The problem is that these things fire very briefly in all sorts of directions, and I don't want it to have all of your maneuvering thrusters on because it looks dumb when you're firing jets in every direction. So, you know. All right, so that's cool. We've done that. Let's see. I think that I may want to go in and create a better placeholder set of room grids here. These grids are great, in my opinion. The more I look at them, the more I like them. They're not perfect in that they have a lot of weird elements to them. Like they are two-dimensional and stuff like that. But the basic idea seems really, really good, and it's something I created by accident. So I'm just looking at it, trying to see, you know, how they look. And basically, the thing I like about them is that they are a lot of horizontal planes with some detail work in them. And the amount of vertical stuff and the bracing in the back is secondary. So let's go ahead and try and work out some visuals for that. We're back here into our interior. I'm not going to delete these guys yet, but I'm not real enthused about them. We're going to put them on probation. And instead we're going to focus for a little while on creating some grids that are a little bit more what we would like to see. Same basic idea holds true, though. So let's see. Hope you couldn't hear me drinking cola. I don't drink it very often. Thinner. Thinner. No, too thin. Oh, too thin. Ah! There we are. So basically, we're going to want to have this kind of thing. And we'll go ahead and make it nice and long. How about 10 either direction? Or 8, I guess. 8 either direction. There we are. And then over here in array, we can create a vertical array. That's not the right direction. That's the right direction. And just create an arbitrary stack of them, right? No problem. But I would like to have a little bit more detail in this object, because it's not simply a flat set in the game world. What we actually have is a very interesting setup. So we will go ahead and replicate that setup. There we are. And what we'll do in order to replicate that setup is we will just delete a crap ton of what I've just created. Delete. There we are. And then we will delete that and close this off like so. And then it's not actually exactly what we want. We'll do this. And then what we'll do is we will create a cut here at the very edge. And then delete this. Seal this. And then, come on, seal this and seal this. No? Come on, there you are. We don't actually need to seal that. Delete that face. And delete this face, because we don't need this face either. Perfect. And then what we'll do is we'll have the array go 2 directions. First, it'll be an X offset. Is it X? No, it's actually Y, isn't it? Yeah, like that, yeah. Yoink. So this is exactly what we had before, except for now we have some divots cut out of it. I don't really like how those divots look, so we're going to just keep adjusting this until it feels right. And the easiest way to do that is to just move the divot around, like so. Yeah, like that. Now, I think that this is way too deep, so we're going to shorten this. There we go. That's more like what I remember seeing. And then, of course, we are going to need to do the Z offset. There we go. So that is the sort of thing that we were seeing. And what we're going to want to do is add in some fun elements in other directions. So we're going to apply that first array modifier so that we actually have a full stack. We'll remove doubles just to solder them together. And then we're going to put in a couple of vertical elements. And the easiest way to put in vertical elements is to just extrude on some of these random vertical beams. How does every 3 seem? Yeah, that's fine. Boom. There we go. So the other thing we've got to do is this whole setup is straight, and we actually don't want it to be straight. We want it to feel curved. So what we're going to do is hide all of this other crap because it's in the way. No, don't insert a keyframe, just invert and then hide. Boom, perfect. And then what we'll do is we'll go into edit mode, we'll select everything, and then we'll Control-Shift-Alt-S, and that will allow us to skew. We can either skew like this, or we can skew like this. The result is basically the same, but I think that this is probably a little bit better, so we'll skew like this. We're also probably going to want to skew on the other axis, but that's a little harder because this vertical stuff is just fake. It doesn't actually exist. It's a modifier. So we'll leave it like that for now. But we are going to want to put in some room elements here. Room elements are going to be interesting because they're not skewed. So we'll grab some of these boxes here. Not the same exact ones, just kind of, well, I guess it doesn't matter. We'll go ahead and just duplicate this one. We'll move it up, and then we'll extrude it up. And then we will just scale this to 0 on the x-axis to give it that flat appearance that we had with some of our objects there. And we'll delete these in the back. And then we can just create arbitrary groups of these as we see fit. So, for example, I'll just pull this one in like so. And maybe make this one shorter and this one taller. And then we can just grab this whole thing and move it into the next section, where we don't want to go in front of that line just because that would look a little weird, but that's fine. We'll just maneuver things around until it feels right. And then again, we'll move it across. This time we'll go for the far side, and we'll just create a bunch of them all stacked up in a row. Because these aren't supposed to be rooms exactly, they're just supposed to be spaceship crap. There we are. Now the problem with this setup is that it doesn't feel right in terms of, oop, I just duplicated a face rather than an entire object. In terms of its repetition, its vertical repetition is very aggressive. So we may have to change how these things are vertically repeating. But that's not a big deal. We can do that. There we go. The last thing we're going to need to do is put in a background wall, which is basically the same thing as the room, except for it is intended to just well, we don't even need it. We don't need a background wall because we do have one already in the game world. What we're going to try and do here is go ahead and give it both a relative and fixed offset. No, both of these, like a 0.2. X is not, that's probably not what we want. 0.2. 0.5. Let's go ahead and just kill this duplicate and manually duplicate it and try and see whether or not we can fit it into a good spot when we manually duplicate it. Basically, we want it to feel like it's offset. So if we do it like that, then we end up with an offset, right? And then if we duplicate it again and move it back up here, that's more or less correct, right? And then we can just join these two and then sever them at the edges here. Like so. And then we can join them into the original, and then we can create that vertical offset. That is more or less what I would like. So we'll go ahead and name this something like room debris placeholder. And we'll see how that looks in Unity. Grind, 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 grind. Do. Come on, seriously? I'll look at Twitter while it's reloading. All right, so I am confused. Did I accidentally save the wrong file or something? Because it shouldn't have, oh, I'm just looking at the wrong tab. I'm just a frigging idiot. Okay, that's fine. That's good. So we've got some stuff down here. We're going to go down here and zoom in on it, and we're just going to delete this again. But now we're going to replace it with our new stuff. Call debris interior, drop it in. This is the only thing we want to keep. We'll drag it out and then delete the original file, or rather the version of the file that is in our game world. Well, we still have the file, obviously. So if we do 555, it ends up looking like that, which is probably a little small. So let's just bring it up to 10, 10, 10. That's a little big. 8, 8, 8. And we'll just try to get this to be more or less the right shape to fit in. Now, the advantage of having a slightly smaller set of rooms is simply that it allows you to tile these with a little bit of freedom as to exactly how the damage is shaped. So, for example, we can easily tilt this one if we want to allow it to emerge a little bit more or a little bit less. And that will allow us to create an uneven surface that still feels very regular, and it should be pretty good. Now, the problem with this is that it doesn't have the same beautiful iconic look as the fake objects. We may have to do some more examining and see whether or not I can get those fakes to feel right. I should not drink soda before streaming. It makes me kind of burpy. I should definitely stop drinking soda while streaming. All right, let's go ahead and try and make this with one more set. Here we are. It's in the shadows, so it's a little hard to see, but I think that's more or less correct. We'll just pitch it a little bit. There we are. Let's go ahead and see how this looks. Boom, 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 boom. I don't know. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel the same. It may be because this one has a lot of regular block elements that this one's missing. See, the ones that I am thinking I like, these guys, were basically created by random luck. I just slapped together a bunch of binary operations and got this result. And they don't look good, normally speaking, in terms of, you know, when you look at them, you're like, ugh. But they match really, really well to the idea of how it would feel to, you know, explore a ruined spaceship and see these elements. And the question is whether or not I can replicate that feeling. And it may be that the real secret is these heavy block elements, which I have, but I don't have them nearly so pronounced. It'd be easy to make them more pronounced. But the other thing it might be is it might be these hollow scaffold elements. Now, the hollow scaffold elements that I duplicated are these long horizontal ones, but I didn't make a lot of them. This has like lots. So maybe the problem is simply that I have the wrong thing duplicated. Well, let's go ahead and change this to having a relative offset of 1 so that I can edit it and it'll still remain properly stacked. Neo Shaman says, "Wort for shortcut. Seeing you click back to the tools makes my OCD ring. Also, lighting might affect my perception." Yeah, I think what's affecting my perception is that I'm admiring an impossible mesh, one that doesn't make any physical sense. But the things I'm admiring about the impossible mesh are something I might be able to make physical sense, if you know what I mean. Anyway, let's go ahead and attempt to create a slightly better setup for ourselves. So we're going to make this one have some extra elements to it, and we're going to do that by deselecting the topmost. I don't think I could box deselect, can I? No, I can't. Okay, so we're going to just manually deselect them. Like that. We're just going to create some stacks of these things like so. And then we're going to try to create some solid, heavy, repeating elements here, which shouldn't be too hard. I don't actually want it to be this exact width because that's the same width as the room down below. So we'll just pick a different width, and then we'll come over here and we'll extend it. And then we'll come over here and we'll de-extend it. And I think that we can delete these vertical bars without losing anything. No, don't delete the verts, just delete the faces. There we are. Right. And then I can grab this guy, duplicate, bring him down. More or less, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. And then we'll want to bring this forward. All right, so I'm still not convinced that this is going to even come close to working, because fundamentally the problem is that I'm admiring a mesh that cannot exist in reality. And obviously there is a limit to how much I can duplicate that by continuing to use meshes that can exist in reality. But, I mean, I'll figure out something that I like. Another thing that we're not doing is we're not duplicating any vertical bars, and that's part of the stuff that we actually do want. We just don't want them exactly where they are in the other elements. So we'll create our own setups. Now, fundamentally, I think we're going to have a problem in that these are simply not two-dimensional. They are three-dimensional. And that's obviously something I don't like. This looks kind of like a bookshelf at this case. Maybe it's because it looks like a bookshelf? Is that why I like it? No, it doesn't look anything like a bookshelf in this world. Okay. Once again, I've completely failed to capture what makes this look interesting. Well, let's go ahead and permanently stick one of these guys up above, just so that I can permanently take a look at it anytime I need to. But who knows? Maybe this will be a little bit better. If you have an opinion on this, feel free to let me know, because obviously I'm just kind of working with what I like, and that's not necessarily something that anyone else will find interesting or cool. You know, that's not actually half bad. I think I actually like that, but the reason that I like it is because now it's overlapping. Because this isn't just one object, it's multiple objects. And what I've got, aha! You can see that they're not at the same depth. The objects have a couple of different depths, and when they overlap, those depths show up. So if I were to make that happen on purpose, I might be able to do this right. So if I were to grab this whole shebang, duplicate it, and then move it so that it was in the back, that might work. Scale Z -1. When I scale Z -1, it inverted everything, so we'll have to flip everything again. There we are. Is that a little too far back? I think it might be a little too far back. There, just like that. Perfect. We'll go ahead and just manipulate the visuals here until it feels a little bit more stable. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be a little bit more stable. There. All right, so I think that that's actually pretty close to how I'd like it to look. Now we go back over into Unity, and we're going to have to manipulate the exact placement again, because these things are placed as if they're half the height they are, and that's kind of stupid, so we'll need to fix that. Oh, wrong button. There we are. That's more like the axis I'd like. And now the last three down here, there we are, we'll move them into the depths of the ship. And curve them. Oh, that's not the right one. There we are. Perfect. All right, let's see how that looks. Neo Shaman says, you have a much better eye than me for sci-fi aesthetics. I'm not so sure about that, but when I see something I like, I kind of chase it until I figure out what I liked about it. Because it's so rare for me to actually be struck by something, especially something that I created. Obviously, this can't be left as is just for lighting's sake. It glows bright gray, which is terrible. But the idea is sound, and the basic visual is not bad. Bonk. Nothing to bonk into yet. So, there we go. This is, on the left, what I'm thinking about for the sort of visual for the interior of the ship. This will save me an inordinate amount of work. Because if I can just use this for the interior of the ship, I don't have to model 800 rooms. It still suggests the idea of having rooms without actually needing me to model them. The only problem is, how do I represent something like a medical bay or something similar being, venting its debris out? And I think the answer to that is I can just have it have debris, like just floating in front of the space here. I don't have to actually explain where it came from in terms of having a room that's visible to you. I can just fake it. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that would be acceptable? I think it would probably be acceptable. I'm going to go ahead and take a screenshot, because it's been a while since I posted a screenshot. And post it. I'll take the screenshot and post it. Trying to do ripped up spaceship interiors without having to make actual rooms. What do you think? Paste. Indie dev. That's not how you spell indie dev. All right. How exciting was that? Very exciting is the answer. It's very exciting, and it's also been 2 hours, and I figured something cool out. I'm going to go ahead and call this a day and take some aspirin. I don't know why, but I have a raging headache. Neo Shaman says he had the same idea. I don't know whether he's talking about me chasing something I like or whether he's talking about posting screenshots. Either way, I'm glad that we had the same idea. And what we're going to do now is stop. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll just stay on for another 10 or 15 seconds to let this catch up with anyone who's watching, since there is an arbitrary delay, especially if you happen to be in, I don't know, Australia. Neo Shaman says the debris, lol. I'm actually not sure what he means. I haven't put in any great debris yet. It's just all placeholder stuff. And obviously I haven't even put in any colliders yet. Yeah, this actually doesn't look bad at all. Thanks to your patience, I actually managed to track down what I liked about my placeholder materials, and I can now say that this actually looks better than the placeholder that I initially generated. I think so, at any rate. That really makes me feel happy. It's so rare that you can actually figure out some visual that you thought was cool and have it still work after you try and boil it down, bake it down. I think a big part of it is the way that light falls on these, both in terms of the sunlight and in terms of your ship's light. Just because of the different depths, it casts shadows in interesting ways. And a big part of these is that they have these weird cuts running along them, and those create unusual depth patterns as well. But this one is on purpose. Now the only thing I have left to do is to make this material not suck. At distance, it needs to be shadowed and dark because the shadows are not being cast. So basically, I'll need to create a material which at ranges greater than shadow cast range just renders as black. And then when you enter into shadow cast range, it renders them properly. So that's an interesting challenge. I'll do that later. Neo Shaman says the debris is 4-room stand-in. These things here, I think I like them. And I think that's what Neo Shaman's telling me. I'm not paying enough attention to chat to really know. But if you're watching this late on YouTube or wherever, let me know what you think of this debris that I've got set up. It's way better than what I started with, right? All right, well, I will see you all on Wednesday, I suppose. I'm probably going to do some more off-screen work. I've been doing a lot of off-screen work with testing out new technical approaches. For example, I spent a couple of days working on rips and tears for Starship engines. So I started with things like these, and they're not very good. And then I graduated to ones like this, and that one's actually not too bad. Got to stuff like this now, so we've got some actual cool looking damage on these engines, and I'm starting to feel pretty confident that I can do debris in a fun way. The only challenge left for debris is I have to be able to create debris fields using a mesh instance system, and I haven't really got that sorted yet, as in I can't remember how to do it at all. I'll figure it out. No biggie. See y'all next week. Where's the stop button?